All right, we back again. It's your main man, Dr. Life, in the business of saving lives. Sitting here. So the last video, we talked about a couple things. All right. So first of all, for those of y'all who don't know who I am, who we are the Dream Team Dr. Life. We are first responders, like I said, in the business of saving lives, disaster relief services.
Hello, Moto.
We provide disaster relief for man-made, artificial, manipulated, man-made disasters. All right. Only way to survive these artificially manipulated, manufactured, man-made disasters is to study the history, learn the business cycle, get back to the root foundation of prosperity and success, and then execute. So I'm here with one of my young ones, and we talked about a will. We talked about the mother tongue. I'm about to connect some dots for her and for you. And the overarching, overall theme that we're discussing here is the sanctuary, the I.T.B. sanctuary recreational economy. Once again, what we're talking about is the in the beginning sanctuary recreation economy. There was an economy. It was the original economy. The original. So the U.S. Treasury was created on something called the greenbacks. Greenbacks. With the assassination of this U.S. President, Abraham Lincoln, they created a fake fiat monetary debt-based system of capitalizing on dehumanization economically that they still utilize to this day. While simultaneously at the same time, before those alien invaders came in and claimed to colonize and claimed to enslave and claimed to set up a constitution and a republic and a democracy and all of those branches of Caesar's Roman fascism is what they set up. All right. So while they was fooling the world and the public, our ancestors who were already here, who had dominion prior to 1500s, 1400s, 1300s, 1200, 1000, 9, 8, 7, 6, 2, 100 AD. And then prior to that, 100 BC, 200 BC, 300 BC, 400, 500, 600, 1000, 2000 BC, 3000, 4000 BC. You only have 2000 years after the creator was born. Before the creator is BC. After the creator, AC. This is how we break down their timelines. Before the creator, after the creator. Keep it simple. Ain't no AD, nothing. AC, after the creator, before the creator. So, if the current monetary system that the U.S. Treasury has only came around out of the Greco-Roman empires. Greece was around, let's say, 400 B before the creator was born. 400 BC. That's no time. That's nothing. That's less than 2,500 years ago. It's nothing. So if Greece just showed their head 2,500 years ago, there was definitely our ancestors' monetary system. Definitely our ancestors had a business cycle. Definitely our ancestors had will and estate transfer of wealth from generation to generation already in place. And the Western world has bit and copied that which our ancestors created. They reverse engineered, defiled it, manipulated it, destroyed it, turned it into a man-made disaster of desolation, a man-made disaster of devouring. And all we're simply here doing is reintroducing the up and coming generations to the knowledge and the wisdom handed down for generation to generation of our original root God family unit, the original God family God family group, the original root God family group, Godhead family group, the original root Godhead family group. All roots of all nations, kindreds, tongues, and people. All true reality. We're not dealing with fantasy and science fiction and myth. No. All true roots of nations, kindreds, tongues, and people. And that's how the world is divided right now. If they could be divided on another in different categories, they have tried and all failed. That's why they run around here calling themselves the United Nations, because the creator said, my people will be identified as people who have tongues, who grow into kindreds, nations, kindreds, tongue, people. My people, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray, tongue. My people speak, tongue. People, tongues, kindred, nation. Without the blessings, the people never grow. Without the blessings, when they open their mouths and speak with their tongues, confess with their tongue, you can confess a blessing or a curse. The power of life and death is in the people's tongue. And the people who have death on their tongue, they never grow. The reason Greek and Rome is on the back end of Earth's history is because death had been on their tongues for so long. You can't grow past a little village of people, a little Stone Age, Ice Age of people, Iron Age of people, the Dark Age, the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages. These people just started coming onto the world stage, just began growing to a point where they could be acknowledged on the world stage. And Earth's history is over. 1500s, 1200s. So talked about a will, talked about the mother tongue. So let me show this younger generation. And let me show the older generation. The older generation who just like the George H.W. Bushes, the Queen Elizabeth II, this baby boomer generation who has done the bidding of keeping this charade of the greenback blood money, black markets going. So now we're about to turn over, not a new leaf, we're turning over the tables of the money changers. That's the new leaf. No more blood money. The new leaf, when they talk about turning over a new leaf, they talk about exposing the underbelly of the blood money. Turn over a new leaf. So this time when you turn over the leaf, ain't no blood money flowing underneath the leaf. It's all on the up and up. Baymac, be about your money at all costs. Be about your mankind at all costs. All right. So I told y'all earlier. I showed y'all earlier. 1998. We threw our hat in the ring in the final battle, the Battle of Armageddon. This is not a written. It was not a written. It's not. Let's talk about holy war. We are the holy warriors. Aliens in this nation. The Vatican and Christianity and Muslims in the East, they're not waging holy wars. Jihad is not a holy war. The Crusades was not a holy war. The holy war, airstrike, happened when the King of Kings said, "Let there be light." That was an airstrike in the holy war. The power of life and death is in the tongue. It's a mother tongue. What the older generation knew nothing about. What the older generation totally missed, the baby boomers and the roaring 20s generation, the Great Depression generation. Then the baby boomers after the Great Depression and after World War I and World War II, it was a generation of baby boomers that got propped up with everything. While the rest of the world was separated between haves and have-nots, the baby boomers were the ones, the children who, the parents of that industrial revolution, where we're going to separate the haves from the have-nots. On an industrial scale, we're going to create industrial multinational corporations, and then the rest of the people, we're going to plunge them into world war and into poverty after a Great Depression and after a New Deal that excludes everybody who's not a part of this industrial wealth. You're slaves. This is the new slave system, slavery by another name. Oh, we can't have a plantation slavery system. Okay, we got a new slavery system. We got a stock market where we trade our livestock. And those in bondage to our industrial revolution, we're going to trade y'all as commodities on a stock market and as a black market, Black Wall Street stock exchange. Slavery by another name. And while the whole world was buying into Uncle Sam and Uncle Sambo's man-made disaster dream for America, our ancestors were standing up, still waging the spoken holy war. Let there be light. Before the 1611 King James version of the Bible was, I am a son of God who was speaking the in the beginning holy war, let there be light. My ancestors have always revealed how the people can return back to the in the beginning power. I'll show it to you today. Let's see if you see what I see.
I'll be right back.
Predestined. Check this out. Check this out. I want y'all to check this out.
Tommy Bahama, the name known for casual comfort at its finest, leaves you the sleep of your dreams at a very dreamy. For this. It's hard to imagine that Hollywood hasn't jumped all over this. You would think it would be box office gold because it's part Spartacus and part Braveheart and...
Listen to what she's saying. Sit up. Come on.
It's hard to imagine that Hollywood hasn't jumped all over this. You would think it would be box office gold because it's part Spartacus and part Braveheart and part Amistad and part Glory with a little bit of Dances with Wolves thrown in. A story decades long of oppression and freedom fighting. I don't understand why there hasn't been more attention to John Horse and the Black Seminoles, but hopefully we can correct this.
What you talking about?
What's his name, John? What was his name? I can't hear it. That's why.
freedom fighting. I don't understand why there hasn't been more attention to John Horse and the Black Seminoles, but hopefully we can correct this. John Horse and the Black Seminoles deserve to be remembered for a number of reasons. They created the largest haven in the US South for runaway slaves. They led.
Where your notebook at? Write down these achievements. What's the name?
John Horse.
John Horse. Achievement number 1. Created what? The largest safe haven for runaway slaves in the South. That's important. He created what? What did he create?
The largest safe haven for slaves.
So the title of this video was The Sanctuary. What the end species health or endangered species health. You know what they do when a species of anything is endangered? You know what that means? Endangered species. You've never covered none of that in science. They never talked about, huh?
Yes.
So what does endangered species mean?
Almost extinct.
All right, so what are you waiting on? So almost extinct. Extinct means when you look outside for a polar bear, when the polar bear has gone extinct, what's going to happen? You won't be able to find no polar bears, right? That's what extinct means.
Yes.
Okay. So endangered species means you one step away from being extinct, from being gone. All right. So how do you know what they do in order to get endangered species from going in the wrong direction, headed towards extinction, back to fruitful and multiplying? Do you know what they do? That's the question.
No.
They pretty much do what John Horse did for people in America who are losing their way of life. So he created a safe haven for in America. So when the animals are about a safe haven, and then they say whatever factor is happening everywhere else besides in this place that was causing this to die out. It could be from people hunting, over hunting. Oh, you know how people just like to go out and kill animals. They just like hunting. They call that sport. So it could be for whatever reason, but a sanctuary is somebody establishes a area and says, yo, whatever is happening that's causing species to be wiped out, when you all come here, that stuff can't happen. Got it? So here you got this is a Stand up for me. This is a newbie. So I ain't gonna call him black. I ain't gonna call him Negro. I ain't gonna, because all of those are.
Led the largest slave
Sit
revolt
back down.
in U.S. history. They secured the only American.
Ah, shoot. Hit the wrong button.
Emancipation of rebellious slaves prior. So he was free in America. Obviously, for him to know the land like he knew the land, obviously he wasn't one of those people who was brought here in the slave trade. This individual, John Horse, and his ancestors live right where you live right now, Florida. Mater Brighton Lakes is in Seminole County. He led the Black Seminole Indians. This whole area is named after this movement. But nobody's telling this story. You know why nobody's telling this story? Not even so-called Black History Month, Black historians, because it goes against the narrative. It goes against the narrative of all of the people that they call Black, or all of the people that they call African Americans. They want African Americans, they want Black people, they want Negroes to believe that they all have no heritage and no lineage, and they all are the descendants of slaves. Understand? But here you have individuals in this continent free, who not only saying, well, y'all on your own, but these people is saying, not only are we free, but the slaves that y'all bringing here from Africa to this continent, we're going to give them an opportunity to be free here on this continent, to live the way we and our ancestors have lived. All right? So this is the legacy that we're going to hand down and we're going to introduce people to. All right? To the U.S. Civil War, and they formed the largest mass exodus of slaves across the United States, moving from the Florida Everglades through Indian Territory, what would become Oklahoma, eventually locating. All right, so listen, he just covered like 7 states, 7 modern day states, right? Oh, hold on. Let's check this out. Now, exodus of slaves across. So up Florida, right? The United States. Tallahassee, Florida. From Florida Everglades. Okay. So this is all Alabama, Georgia. This is Mississippi. Through Indian Territory, what would become all the way up to Ohio, down through Louisiana. Oklahoma, eventually No, Oregon is way up here. This is Texas, baby.
No, up there, right there was Oregon.
No, it's Ohio up there. Oregon is way. If you go on a map, if Texas is right here on this map, Oregon is going.
You wrote the map wrong.
No. Oregon is in the top left western corner of Seattle, Utah, Washington, the state, is all the way at the top left. So if you on the West Coast, LA and or Uncle Spider and them and Las Vegas and all that is on the bottom. And then when you come all the way up that coast, you come up to San Francisco, you come up to Washington, Utah, Oregon, up there. She's in the middle of the country here. She's way over here.
Go back.
Mass exodus of slaves across the United States, moving from the Florida Everglades.
Okay,
A little farther.
see that? Jackson, Mobile. This is Alabama, baby. Oregon
No,
is
I understand what you're saying. It just look in the corner right there. Right there.
right here.
No, over. No. Yes. That word right there.
Oh, it's not Oregon.
Through
Osages.
What?
That's not important. No. These is all rivers. This ain't. This is. You go again, yeah.
Whoa.
Look at that Oregon, yo. This is
That's what it
all the
said.
country, yo. Osages.
I don't know what to say.
Indian territory, what would become
And this is this is talking about Indian tribe. This is tribes.
Indiana. It's over
Oklahoma,
there too.
eventually located
Oklahoma. See the Apaches. It's telling you the different tribes. This is an Indian tribal map too. This is Apache. I'm telling you where the different Indian tribes were staying in what states. But the point is, back during this time, for him to be able to lead, and this is something that they don't teach y'all in school. They teach y'all that Indians lived in America. That's what they teach y'all.
Now, I don't remember that. Indians in America?
Yeah. This is what the whole Plymouth Rock, this is what the whole Thanksgiving thing where
Oh yeah. I'm telling you, that was like second grade.
I'm saying, but that's all they teach. That's the only story they teach. They haven't taught a different story. That's the only story that they've left you with since second grade, third grade. That's the only story they teach, period. The English came over, Nina Pinta Santa Marina, landed on Plymouth Rock, Pocahontas, Indians. But when you start looking at the real pictures of these people, you see that they look like the same Haitians that we saw when we went to Haiti. And they don't have an explanation for, well, why when they taking pictures in the 1500s and why in the 1400s where the Italian colonizers and where the Roman Catholic Jesuit so-called missionaries were coming here and taking pictures and drawing pictures. They're drawing pictures of Shaka Zulu.
What?
It's no way you're in the 9th grade, you don't know who Shaka Zulu is. Shaka Zulu is the most famous African king, warrior king. Shaka Zulu is the...
When was I supposed to learn about that?
Never mind, Destiny. Anyway, all of the pictures of the people who was here when they was really coming over here look like are Africans. All right. And then when those Europeans and those Europeans started having children with Africans, this is 1400s, 1300s. America is not found until 1776. So that's if they was coming over here in the 1300s, right? That's 400 years. And so if Europeans and Africans are having children, and then their children are having children, then there's going to be mixed. There's going to be babies that are going to be mixed and blended with the different complexions, the different hair color, hair textures, the different whatever. And so when they start telling the story of America in 1700, it's a reason they start in the 1700s, because they have 300 years worth of Indians now. The offspring of
How is American and African make Indian? How does that work?
okay. You serious? You haven't noticed that two blonde hair, blue eyed Germans can come together and they'll never produce what the world calls an African American child. Okay. But I have an aunt. You have an aunt named Aunt Henrietta.
Yes.
You have an aunt named Aunt Mary. Okay. Aunt Henrietta is probably, I would say, 2 or 3 shades lighter than Aunt Mary, her sister. Okay. Aunt Mary might be my complexion, but Aunt Henrietta is I would say 3 shades
Gray?
lighter than me. Huh?
Like gray?
She's lighter than Granny. All right. And only out of our ancestors and lineage do you see all of the whole rainbow of humanity. Okay. If I married a European, I could produce a child as dark as Xavier with a European female, and I could produce a child as light as, you remember Jasmine?
Yes.
See how light Jasmine is, right? Okay. Most people would consider Jasmine to be a white girl. Did you see Aunt Libby?
Mm-hmm.
Aunt Libby's darker than me.
Mm-hmm.
So every rainbow of humanity can come through us. But nobody else can produce the darkest people on the planet. 2 Chinese people cannot come together and produce. Who's the darkest person? One of the darkest people in our family.
Somebody reducing a film? Is that what you're asking?
Anybody. I'm just trying to think of somebody who's.
Uncle Larry's darker than you, isn't he?
No, you got the same complexion.
Are you sure?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mm-mm.
But the darkest people on the planet, right, can only come from one source. But from that same source, us, we produce some of the lightest people on the planet. Right. We could any shade, any and every shade comes from us, yo. I could show you a couple who had twins, and one of the babies is dark, and one looked like a German baby. twins from the same parents. And it's only because the father is like a little bit darker than me. All right. And that's what happens. So what I'm saying is when the Europeans came and started having children with those Africans, that's why you see Indian tribes. Some are super dark, some are super light. So, you know what I'm saying? You got, it's the same thing.
I understood that part. I need the names.
So, but they won't tell the story because
in Mexico, where they
they
secured
really
the
want
title
people
to
to believe.
It's a remarkable story.
They want the world to believe that we have always been enslaved to Europeans. Why? Because the European economy is built off of slavery. And if the slaves who are running the economy ever wake up and realize, yo, we could go back to being kings and queens, then the Europeans is like, okay, who then are going to be the slaves? Understand? That's all.
They have a queen.
Yeah, they made up a fake queen. Yeah, Queen Elizabeth. Yeah.
Okay, so then she's just gonna make everybody who's normal.
Huh?
I said that she's just gonna make everybody who's normal.
But she's normal. She just assumed the title.
Yeah, I mean, if the slaves wake up, then she's just gonna make the normal people just walk around all day.
Well, yeah, they have always, the way they created this system of slavery was saying that, yo, I am the queen, I own this land, and if you live on this land, they called you a feudal. They called it feudalism. All right. So they said, if you live on my land, you need to work my land and produce crops and produce the food for the nation. And you give me 70% of what you make and keep 30 to live off of. Feudalism.
Okay, fine. I'm leaving. I'm getting a boat.
And the crazy thing was, for hundreds of years in Europe, they all had a feudalistic system. All right. So they also called them peasants or peasantry. So the peasants were attached to the land. You know what I'm saying? They ain't had no multiple houses. They ain't had no. Yeah. Yeah. So it wasn't like you could, like, for generations and generations, like if your dad was the local herdsman, then that's the trade that they would pass down, and then you would become a herdsman. You know what I'm saying? If you until the Vatican came around and started creating schools where you could go into the school and then become a noble or a scientist or whatever. But for the most part, people did whatever trade was being ran in the family. Yes. And whatever lands they lived on, when the parents died, the kids did live there. And then the daughters, when they would marry other people, they would marry into families who had a trade in that family. And then whatever that son parents did and left to them. And if they were poor, then they was just poor and they would stay poor. And then the king and them, they set up nobles, and the nobles would go and enforce the tax and come and collect. So this is where the knights come in. You know, in Europe, they claim they had knights.
Do they still?
Yeah, they still got knights that's robbed the people. Yeah, exactly. You know what I'm saying? So the knights would come around, and then they had a group of people called nobles, right? You had the knights. The knights are the military.
Hood.
Then you had the nobles, right? The nobles are like the governors. Like you got a governor of Florida, you got a governor of Alabama, you got a governor, you know what I'm saying? So they broke down the king land and they placed governors over mass groups of people. And they called them the nobles. And then the nobles called on the knights to enforce the laws of the land. So if the people tried to rise up or whatever, the nobles had the bread to be able to bring in the knights to come in. But the bad thing about it was, just like today with the police not there to serve and protect the people. They there to serve and protect the nobles, serve and protect the knights. The police are the knights. They're to enforce and make sure that the system that the ruling society has put in place stays in place. People are taxed like they supposed to tax. The people, if they agree to produce X amount, blah blah blah, this is what income tax is about. You work all year, and they take it out of your check, and then they say, okay, we took too much. We're gonna give you this back at the beginning of the year. Why the heck am I giving you anything out of my check?
No, man. We took too much. I'm gonna give you this back.
Word. That's income tax. That's what the IRS is. This is this hustle that they set up way back then. Why? Because of
thieves.
But it goes back, everything always goes back to stuff that came out of God's mouth when talking to his children. So Cain, when he killed Abel, God said, "Cursed will be the ground. It will no longer bring forth fruit in its strength for you." So God was saying, you're gonna be the father, and your descendants are gonna be a people who will be restless wanderers, vagabonds on the face of the earth. This is what Cain said, right? So these people have been wandering because they don't have no land. When you looked at Adam and Adam's children didn't wander nowhere. Adam's children, because soon as God let the children of Israel go into the Canaan land, he divided the Canaan land up between the tribes, right? So each tribe had a father, a tribal leader. And so he would be like, yo, these hundreds of miles over here are for the tribe of Benjamin. And let's say it was 10 clans in the tribe of Benjamin, right? So that 100 miles was divided up between 10 clans, right? So the 10 clans each would get 10 miles. And they would call that an estate or their vineyard. You know what I'm saying? So you had the chief, the elder of the tribe of Benjamin, and then you had 10 chiefs of the clans of Benjamin. You got me? So when Joshua was like, the tribe of Benjamin, your boundaries of your land is going to go from the river Jordan over to the Nile River. All right? Let's say that was 100 miles. Then he would tell the elder of the tribe of Benjamin, go and divide between your 10 sons how that 100 acres is going to be split between them. The sons that you're going to send to the east, the sons you're going to send to the west, sons you're going to send to the north, to the south, divide it up, tell them what their boundaries are. Okay, this son, your boundaries are going to go from this valley over here down to this river, and this stream to this, boom, and that's your 10. And then this son over here, boom, 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 boom. And each one of them now had an estate that they would hand down to their children and their children's children's children. So Benjamin, everybody knew in Israel, yo, when you go up over this hill in this valley, you coming into the land of Benjamin. You know what I'm saying? And then because they knew each other like that, they would know, yo, this is Chief so and so's estate right here. And then next to Chief so and so's estate is his brother, Chief such and such estate. You know what I'm saying? And so people traveled through the land of the children of Israel based off of their birthright lands. You understand what I'm saying? And it was the same thing when you went to Judah. It was the same thing when you went to Naphtali and Simeon and David and Moses and Joshua just spread all of the tribes out all over the land and then gave them their estates and like, listen, man, that's your land. And as long as you stay in the covenant with God, your portion will be blessed. And let's say half of them follow God. And then the other half started going back to how they was worshiping when they was in Egypt. Literally. The cats who started worshiping pagan idols, either surrounding nations would be allowed to raid, take their stuff, famine would come. So you would have 5 of the brothers over here who's still in the covenant, and their stuff is all good. Every season, their crops is coming good, their herds, their everything, their children is being blessed, their families is growing, boom, 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 boom. They flourishing. Then you got these cats over here. They suffering, they poor, they destitute. Everything in God's thing was connected to his blessing that he gave them. All right. So I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna switch from the screen.
Hey, wait. Cain was marked so that people knew what he did. Does
30 minutes and we got it?
Yeah, we
Stop and Chase. And she needs to get dressed and ride too.
Okay. Go.
Does that make all white people bad?
No.
But that's the reason they were marked.
Well, I'll get into that. I'll explain that. That's making a general blanket statement. We won't make general blanket statements on anything. All right. So, and I'll show it to you rather than just making a blanket statement. Let's finish that video though on John Horst stuff. So
Story. It's overlooked not just by filmmakers, it's not well known in popular culture, and in fact, it's been overlooked by historians of slavery, if you can believe it. In the early 18th century, 2 groups in particular fled the colonial South into Spanish Florida, into the Everglades. One of these groups were Seminoles, who were migrating from the various colonies, just trying to avoid white encroachment, basically, trying to move someplace that white colonists weren't. And the other group was runaway slaves, people who were fleeing and trying to create a free life for themselves. Both.
all right, but remember, she's missing 2 other groups. All right, because when you start, she started in the 18th century, right? So we know the slave trade is going by then. All right. So that means they're actively bringing people from West Africa now into America. They said they started that around 1620s, whatever. You know what I'm saying? They say the transatlantic slave trade started in 1600. All right. So the problem with the way that they tell history is they act as if nothing ever happened before then. They act as if suddenly in 1600s, for the first time, somebody walked on the shores over here and history just started right at that point. All right. So that's when they started bringing people from West Africa in a slave trade in the 1600s. But before then, there were individuals dating back to Paul's day. All right. So I'll give you an example. The Apostle Paul that it talks about in the Bible, all right, was alive right after Jesus died, right? So Jesus died around 30 to 40, let's say after Christ, AC. All right. So let's say Paul was, let's say 40 to 70 AC. All right. So it says Saul was of Tarshish. Remember in Jonah? Jonah asked, what's the furthest place I could go away from Nineveh? God want me to go to Nineveh. What's the furthest place I could go? Okay, so we already know, when we read the Bible, we already know that people were sailing to distant places during that time, during the biblical times of those days. You understand? And Saul, the Apostle Paul, was actually born in Tarshish. It says Saul of Tarshish. All right. So where Jonah was trying to go to, that distant place, that's the original home of the Apostle Paul. You understand? So what I'm trying to tell you is they tell the story as if nobody ever inhabited any of these lands until they started doing the slave trade. But the Bible is clear that these distant lands were already inhabited by clans that it spelled out right after they came out of the ark. Right after Noah came out of the ark, Noah did with his sons the same thing that Joshua and Moses did with the children of Israel. So remember how I was just explaining to you, they divvied up between, okay, you and the tribe of Benjamin, you're going to have this land over here. Noah did the same thing with his three sons when he came out of the ark. This is like 4,000 years before Moses. Understand? And they had already sailed all around the globe.
So who are the people in America?
So Noah's oldest, okay, so the way it works is the oldest son gets the largest.
Piece of land.
That's what the firstborn bless. So remember when Jacob and Esau were fighting over the firstborn blessing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So the firstborn blessing is the material possessions that the father owns. And he says, you're the firstborn, and the firstborn gets my possessions. The birthright is the spiritual priesthood that kept the people in covenant with God.
Okay.
All right. That's the one that Esau ain't want to have no part of. Esau didn't care nothing about continuing their hair. Yeah, he ain't one. He like, I don't care nothing about that priesthood. You can have that. You know what I'm saying? But that's the part that keeps your blessings in your land flowing. When you no longer have the covenant with God, yo, you under the curses. It don't matter how much land you got. It don't matter how much money you got. All right. So with Noah, though, Noah's oldest son was Japheth.
Okay.
All right. And when you go to Genesis chapter 10, that same Tarshish is a son of Japheth. All right. So Noah expanded, gave the firstborn blessing to Japheth and said, yo, and it says he is the father of the maritime nations, meaning Japheth was the one who continued to prosper off of shipbuilding and then sailing to all of the distant lands and building his clans and his kindred in all of the distant lands. He was the father who brought.
Wait, if he gets the biggest land, shouldn't he have got Russia?
Well,
Russia's big.
technically, So when the curse came, all right,
Uh-huh.
God said the land of Nod. He specified that he would wander to a land of Nod, right?
That's Russia.
Let me explain it like this. So that same son Japheth,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
That same son Japheth married a daughter of Cain.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
So remember, Noah had 3 sons,
Mm-hmm.
and Noah took a wife, and his 3 sons took wives.
Yes.
All right. So Japheth took, says the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair. Okay.
Mhm.
So the daughters of men is Cain's daughters.
Yes.
All right. So it says, now when Japheth
Mhm.
married Cain's daughter,
Mhm.
remember we talked about how genetically Indians and all
Yes.
type of stuff. All right. So the German people of Germany
Mhm.
and Russia, they're all German. All of those European clans are German clans. They're called Germanic tribes. It was 10 of them. They're all German descent in descent.
There's 10 of them.
There were 10 of them. All right. In biblical time, in Babylon, when Babylon was on the scene, they had broken off into 10 clans. Just like I gave you the example of Benjamin
Yes.
breaking
That's
down.
what I thought you were
Okay.
talking
Yeah, no, they did the same thing with the Germanic
about. Oh,
tribes.
so it is separate.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So, but in Europe, there was a son named Gomer and Magog. Gomer and Magog.
Okay.
Okay. So this couple, they had sons that became the father of the maritime nations, and then they had sons that stayed on the land. All right. Cain's curse was a curse on the land, right? So what happened is the sons that remained on the land fell under the curse of Cain.
Okay.
And the sons that started sailing inherited their father's first fruit blessing. And all throughout history, when you follow the lineage of Gomer and Magog, you see the same wickedness that Cain was involved in, same idol worship, same everything. And out of those maritime nations, that's where Nineveh,
Uh-huh.
okay?
But wasn't Nineveh bad at one point?
Right, but Nineveh is the only nation, unlike Sodom and Gomorrah, who when God, exactly, exactly. And then when Christ came on the earth himself, he said, the men of Nineveh will judge this final generation. He said, because when I sent Jonah to them, they responded properly. And he said, one greater than Jonah is here. He talking about himself. I'm greater than Jonah. I'm the living son of God. And I'm coming and I'm doing the same thing to you, Israel, that Jonah did for Nineveh. And Nineveh responded and repented and turned, and you won't. And you gonna kill me. So he said, the men of Nineveh will judge this generation. Understand? And the men of Nineveh came from that firstborn, Jacob. No, Nineveh's not around. They've erased all of that. They've made all of that. Everything over there, they made pagan. Rome has changed the names of it, and Rome has everything that God used. And blessed, they done.
Nineveh is in Africa, though, right?
Yes. So those same Africans.
Northern Africa?
Yes, Northern Africa.
So it's up there at the tip.
Yeah. Actually, they call it the Middle East now.
What does that even mean?
Exactly. It's Africa. All right. So Iraq is where Babylon literally is Babylon. The literal Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel and all that is where present day Iraq is. Literally. They built Iraq on the castle that Nebuchadnezzar lived in and Daniel and all. Iraq. Okay. So northwest of Babylon or Iraq is Assyria. Assyria was the capital of Nineveh was the capital of Assyria.
East. What is in so? What is Middle East? What is
Nothing. The British
how do
just
you get in the middle of
because they just wanted to claim that land because so much happened in the Bible in that, and they didn't want. Okay, so they rebranded Africa and they carved it up in 1888, right? And so they run the same propaganda in Africa that they run here, right? Africa has been enslaved to colonialism since 1888. America has been enslaved since colonial since 1600s, right? So in order for them enslaved Africans to identify with the colonial labels that they put on them, they tried to carve out Jerusalem and all of those places where Christ walked and did all of his stuff. They call all of that stuff that happened in the Bible that people could trace directly to the Bible. They call that the Middle East, just so that people of African descent don't identify with that history. That's the only reason that they call that. And so now they come back and they tell them that Egyptians were European, and they tell them that the children of Israel were European, and they tell them that the Philistines were European. They tell you everybody is European. So now when they tell you that the Middle East is European lands, then people who turn on Bible movies and all of that, they're not going to identify with none of the Bible movies. That's why African Americans, and that's why Africans and all of them, they gravitate to the pagan ancestral worship, because they leave all of that still in the pictures of all of that stuff. They still leave the tribal faces on that mess.
Northeast, South, and West are basically like points.
Yes.
Okay, so if there's a north, a east, a south, and a west of Africa, how do you get in the middle?
You can. Exactly. Good point.
There is no middle.
There is no middle, and there sure ain't no Middle East. What's a Middle East?
If east is a point,
Right.
that means it's all the way on the corner.
Exactly.
So how do you get in the middle of a corner?
Right.
You can't get in the middle of that.
Exactly. All right. So that's it for that one. That one was about John Horse. We're gonna expose. So what I want Predestiny to know is there's a history of right where we stand at. So if John Horse was here free, right? So his father was here free.
Yeah.
His grandfather was here free.
Mm-hmm.
His great grandfather.
Yeah.
I can show you
The whole family.
the family tree going back from starting with, okay, we could start with the creator and Paul, and we could come forward to today, and I could start with the creator and his mother Mary, and in Luke chapter 3, he tells you his lineage going all the way back to Adam and Eve. We can go forward till when he comes, and we could go backwards to when he created the world. Unbroken. This is the
Timeline.
this is the timeline that I'm about to give you. But what I want you to know is right here in Florida, in the same spot, and our we're gonna shoot this movie. You know how they shot a movie called Dancing with Wolves. You know how they shoot. You need to get your movie history up. The Pocahontas movie, Dances with Wolves.
I still need to see the color.
Yeah, but nobody will shoot this because it will expose the fact that our ancestors were here and free. How will you know how to go from Florida up into New Orleans, up into Ohio, down through Texas and Mexico if you ain't know the land? The slaves never got free because they didn't know the land. When they brought them here on the boats, he went through 5 different states. Destiny. Every different terrain, swamp, and
ain't no way in the world.
Ain't nobody coming from West Africa coming over here on a boat who don't know these lands at all, gonna take some people and lead people through a nation and a country that they don't know. Then he got down to Mexico and had the nation of Mexico give them land and acknowledge them and allow them to guard their northern border. Like,
we are a family, like a giant tree, reaching out towards the sky.
So this the history we about to expose. While they still giving that charade of Black history, we're gonna let these young people know their true heritage and what their future look like based off of their dominion that they've always had in the past. Peace.